had combat battalion.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know nothing about engineering. And I said, this is crazy.
I guess they figure you had enough degrees, you can
I
wing
had
it.
2
right?
degrees and stuff, and they're going to send me to combat engineers, and they out there on the picking shovels and building bridges. It was a battalion.
Yes.
And I caught it down there,
Mm-hmm.
and ended up having some problems on the main post of Fort Benning because I wanted to take a class at night in school, and they wouldn't let me take the class.
Mm-hmm.
So when I say they, I mean the state of Georgia wouldn't let me in and take that class.
Ah, okay.
So I got a hold of Thurgood Marshall and as well as Adam Clayton Powell.
Mm-hmm.
To make a long story short, they being the Army and the state of Georgia, moved the school, those evening courses away from Fort Benning, 10 miles away into Columbus.
Mm-hmm.
And all over the United States, they started either moving those schools out or integrating. But Georgia decided not to integrate. And
Mm-hmm.
my argument to several of the officials, I said, you're on post. This is a military installation. How are you going to do that?
Right.
And they said, well, the state says that we can't let you take these courses for credit. I said, I don't want to take it for credit.
Mm-hmm.
See, they thought they had me because I asked to take a course in criminology.
Mm-hmm.
So they thought they had me, and I did not take the entrance exam for school. And they said, it's too late, you haven't taken it. I said, yeah, but I also have a degree in political science and economics. I said, oh. I said, well, what fields? I said, economics, political science. They said, well, criminology is a sociology type course.
Okay.
So you don't have the background to take that. I said, I also have a law degree from Georgetown in political and I took criminal law and procedure.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when they said, no, we can't let you in.
Mm-hmm.
And so I fought it, and then they shipped me out. They got mad and shipped me out from Fort Benning
Mm-hmm.
to Fort Belvoir.
St. Virginia. Yes.
And when I got to Fort Belvoir, the first day I was there, I was on KP. And then while I was there the second day, I was interviewed by an officer in the Adjutant General's office. And he said that, can you do morning reports and what have you? I said, yeah. He said, well, we got an office here that takes care of that activity. We're going to assign you to them. I said, okay. So they escorted me downstairs to the basement level. And there were 2 blacks there. And they were the only 2 in this office, and it's really just dealing with paperwork and stuff. It really wasn't even anything of true cognitive substance, not at all.
Mm-hmm.
So I was there, and about 3 hours or 4 hours later, they came and got me and said, no, we don't want you to work here. And they put me on the first floor by the front door in an office to work with a Jewish lawyer,
Mm-hmm.
an elderly Jewish lawyer. They wanted to be able to say that they had more than those 2 blacks in the basement.
Mm-hmm.
So they put me by the door. So I was spooked by the door.
Just like the movie.
That's like the movie. So that's those of my early years, and I used to come to Washington Alumni meetings during that time and got to know George Hayes, the great civil rights lawyer and professor at Howard, Julian Dugas. He was a Kappa, because George Hayes was too,
Mm-hmm.
and some of the others, Lamont Lawson and all
Yes.
those guys. And I just was a little youngster in the early 20s, sitting up in the Washington Alumni meeting, raising a point of order.
Uh-huh.
And that kind of stuff. Next thing I knew, I started moving up the ladder.
Okay, great. Well, let's talk about that. Let's go back a little bit
Okay.
and talk about. Did you have any experience when you were in the Army? Did you have any experience with in interacting with other Kappas while you were in the Army at all?
Yes, and it was a good experience. I attended the meetings of Columbus, Georgia alumni.
Oh, okay.
And it was at the same time I was having this problem.
Yes.
And the guys told me when I got shipped out, they said, you came down here and stirred up all this stuff. Now you're going back to Washington.
You gotta go.
You gotta go.
Right.
And the guy at the NAACP, the secretary to the NAACP, was a very close friend of my father.
Okay.
And that's all North Carolina Mutual people. And he was a Kappa too.
Ah, okay.
And then I ran into another Kappa who was the Dean of Pledges at Howard
Okay.
in the 47 and 48. He was a medical doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Had gone to Howard Medical School and what have you, and went into the service as a captain because he was a licensed physician.
Mm-hmm.
And his name will come to me in a moment. But we were good close friends, and every other weekend I would spend with him and his family. He had a little baby boy in Columbus, as well as the other couple with the good brother from North Carolina Mutual Capital. And while I was there, a black dentist, I think he was a dentist, if not he was a physician, was murdered by a white guy,
Mm-hmm.
a white store owner. And it made all kinds of headlines and news.
Mm-hmm.
So what they did, that created a vacancy
Mm-hmm.
on the board of directors for the NAACP Columbus branch.
Mm-hmm.
So they recruited me to fill that vacancy. And I
Mhm.
told them, I said, no, I'm in the Army now, and I'm not going to be here much longer. I mean, all we want you and the two other black lawyers in the whole city of Columbus.
Right.
And we want you.
Oh, wow.
So I said, well, let me think about it. And the guy who was sitting in front of me in the meeting turned around and said, we got to have you. And I noticed he was a minister too. I'd heard him being addressed as Reverend such and such.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed he had 38 in his belt. So I touched him on the shoulder. I said, what did you say? He said, we want you. I said, okay.
The 38 was enough, right? That was a good.
Enough. And that's so sad because those guys, and he wasn't the only one, several of the members of the NAACP, when they would have those meetings,
Mm-hmm.
every 3 or 4 Sundays or whatever, they armed when they went to those meetings.
Wow.
We're talking about Columbus, Georgia,
Mhm.
in the 1950s.
Mm-hmm.
They were armed because
Wow.
you never could tell what would go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I got shipped out, that's when they laughed and said, yeah, you come down here and stir up all this stuff, now you're going back home.
Right.
So that's what impacted me.
Mm-hmm.
And when I came back from down there, I had the GI Bill.
Okay.
And I got drafted and went in, like I said, that was in January of 55.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea that I was going to get the GI Bill.
Right.
The GI Bill of Rights expired
Mm-hmm.
January 31st, 1955, and I went in on the 12th.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
I used that GI Bill and got a master's in law from Georgetown with the government paid.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, great. Now let's go back forward.
Okay.
Because I cut you off and
That's all right.
talk about when you first started being more active in Washington Alumni. So when you came back, when they kicked you out of South Carolina,
That's right.
and you moved back up to D.C.
Uh-huh.
Tell us more about that. I know you like you said, you mentioned a lot of notable
I started
Kappas
right
at that time.
away.
Like, and of course, I'm sure you met. I guess at the time was these Pole Mark, Stud Green.
Stud Green, oh yeah, Brother Green. All those guys. When I first came to Washington Alumni,
Mm-hmm.
really, it was in September or October of 51. I just graduated from Howard
Right.
in 50.
Mm-hmm.
And I started going to, because I went to meetings at C Chapter for about 6 months
Mhm.
while I was down in Georgetown. Well, before I went to Georgetown, I also went to American U
Mm-hmm.
for a couple of semesters and took some courses in political science and stuff like that.
Okay.
And during that time, I transitioned over to Howard's, not Howard, but to Washington Alumni.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I met all those great guys.
Mm-hmm.
And I had the yearning to see what made them tick.
Okay.
Because when I was at Columbia, South Carolina, and at Allen, when I was in the Pledge Club at Columbia, and when I became a Kappa there at Beta Row,
Mm-hmm.
we only had 2 black lawyers in the whole city of Columbia, South Carolina.
Right.
One was a Q and one was a Kappa.
Mm-hmm.
And so I used to go to and Kappa had been in the service.
Mm-hmm.
The Q was the NAACP man. He had been in the service, but he's spending his time with the NAACP. But I used to go and sit with him, and he would tell me about not only JAG and what have you,
Mhm.
tell me about being a Kappa.
Mhm.
And he had his office in the downtown predominantly black section.
Mhm.
And I just love to hear him talk about Kappa from that standpoint, being a lawyer and what have you,
Mhm.
and being an ex-GI. So when I then came to Howard, that was immediately into Z.
Mhm.
And then when I got out of Z, I've had reflections on fun I used to have listening to him. He was kind of
Mhm.
like a mentor.
Okay.
So I then, after graduating from Howard and going to the law school, started going to Washington Alumni meetings. And I didn't miss any meetings for years and years.
Oh wow. Okay.
We had our little group,
Mhm.
not true group as such, because I always talk about one Kappa.
Mhm.
But we had our little group, the older guys. They were treating us as they were our mentors and what have you. We still were their equals,
Mhm.
but they did it from a professorial standpoint or what have you.
Mhm.
And they had a lot of experience back during World War II and prior there too. And we all would listen to these guys,
Mhm.
Stud Green and Jesse Dedman and all those guys. And I'd be just sitting there, a little young lawyer, listening.
Mhm.
And then as I got a little older, I found myself on some of the committees.
Right.
And I found myself in Washington Alumni meeting rising to a point of order too. And they used to say, that young brother, who does he think he is? And I would talk,
Mhm.
and that's how I really got involved and became, started moving up into Province too.
Okay, great. So let's start there as far as within the province. Now you've been the general counsel in the Eastern Province.
Right.
You've also been the general counsel for the fraternity as a whole.
Right.
Sometimes I get confused, and you can straighten out for the rest of us.
Mhm.
Which one were you first? Were you first general counsel for the Eastern Province first, or were you general counsel for the fraternity first?
I was first an unofficial
Mm-hmm.
general counsel to the province.
Okay.
We did not have.
I'm sorry, who was the province Beaumont at that time? Do you remember?
That was probably, it either was Judge Slim Overton. Slim was his nickname. James
Okay.
Overton.
Okay.
Or before him, we had, name was on the tip of my tongue. We had several province Beaumont with Jesse Dedman during that time. I get them all mixed up as to who was first and who was second.
Understood.
Jesse Dedman was a lawyer. Then we
Okay.
had a lawyer out of Norfolk.
Yes.
His name will come to me in a minute. I got to know a little.
Okay.
But Washington played a pretty strong role. See, remember during those days we didn't have as many chapters in the province. We didn't have the Silver Spring, which came around in '71. We didn't have a lot of the other chapters.
Mm-hmm.
Washington, Richmond, we didn't even have Fredericksburg. I helped set up those chapters like Fredericksburg and the rest of them.
Mm-hmm.
And for the Houston conclave, the last time we were in Houston,
Mm-hmm.
I was a delegate from Washington Alumni, and I had 3 proxies from Fredericksburg Alumni,
Mm-hmm.
because my wife's home, my in-laws were from Fredericksburg, so I kind of had a slight attachment to that particular place because I married a Fredericksburg girl.
Virginia, I do like Virginia girls. I understand that one. Yes.
I didn't have much choice.
Okay.
They look good.
You're right. Right. So okay, good. So you came up through there through the Eastern Province,
Mhm.
and apparently, now make sure I get the story right.
Mhm.
You were the first unofficial / official general counsel of a province, correct?
Right. That
Okay.
it became truly official when Brother Tubman
Mm-hmm.
was the province Beaumont.
Mm-hmm.
And he had convened a hearing
Yes.
for an alumni chapter. It might have been Alpha Phi
Virginia State.
at Virginia State. It might have been, because I remember we were meeting there
Mm-hmm.
and holding